Good evening, colleagues, friends, family. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Professor Heidi Fuller. I'm the Head of School for Allied Health Professions and Pharmacy here at Keele, which is Naomi's official home, although her role spans the whole Faculty of Medicine and Health Sciences. So it's a real pleasure to welcome you here tonight to Naomi's inaugural professorial lecture, Simulation, the Girl Behind the Mask. This is a chance for us to hear about Naomi's journey so far, and if we're lucky, perhaps some tales that didn't quite make the CV. It's about Naomi's past achievements, but also the impact that she continues to have on health education and maybe what the future holds as well in that regard. I think we're in for a real treat. I'm sure it'll be thought-provoking and inspiring, and no doubt with a bit of humour and heart, knowing Naomi as well. So before I hand over to Naomi, I've got a biography to share with you. So Naomi is the Faculty Director of Simulation across Medicine and Health Sciences here at Keele. Naomi's background is as a diagnostic radiographer specialising in reportive radiography. During her time in clinical practice, Naomi has worked at large teaching hospitals in Nottingham and in Inverness, leading the conventional imaging department and linked community sites across the Highlands. Naomi moved into academia in 2013, working first at Robert Gordon University and later at Derby University. Her interest in simulation led to the completion of her doctorate in professional practice in 2022. Her thesis is entitled, The Role of Simulation and Moulage on Emotional Labour in First-Year Diagnostic Radiography Students when Seeing Open Wounds in a Clinical Setting. Naomi has published widely on the use of simulation in radiography and is regularly invited to speak on an international platform about simulated practice. Naomi is frequently consulted for her expertise and mentors individuals from other professions and institutes, both at Keele and outside of Keele. Naomi is an expert by experience herself and heavily promotes providing patients and carers a voice in education and research. Amongst others, her external roles include chairing the Society of Radiographers Simulation Specialist Interest Group, patient lead for the UK Imaging and Oncology Conference, and an executive committee member for the Association for Simulated Practice in Healthcare in the UK. Naomi's expertise, research and guidance in simulation contributed to her National Teaching Fellowship Award in 2022. So without further ado, I will hand over to Naomi.
Thank you very much, Heidi. Hi, Nins. Where do I start? I start with a big thank you to all of you for coming and supporting me today. And we have my daughter in the room, so we might be having that word interjected here and there. I'm hoping the title of my presentation will become clear as I work my way through it. But I've structured it around a story. Because actually we all have experiences in our lives, and what drives those experiences are often our emotions and how we make our decisions and how we behave around different people. So the story today is of one of emotion and human connection. I do have my tissues at the ready. If I get through this without crying, a miracle will have happened. So to get started, at the beginning. In the early years, I'm going to start with my father. This is a picture of myself and my older sister Ruth and my dad. My dad is a very successful person. He is an engineer. He has become director of engineering and I suppose installed many of my characteristics. One of speaking out, quite extroverted personality. One of trying new things and giving things a go. Dad hasn't stopped there. He's still working. He's very persistent on a traction engine that we will see emerge from this garage. It's been about 40-something odd years. But we will see it. It keeps him busy. And I think persistence is something that I've also got from my father. This is an image of us on holiday last year, and many of you will know that I had to reschedule this presentation My father checked in a few of his tokens with the NHS, and I'm more than happy to see you here today, Dad. I couldn't do this without you, so thank you very much. Now, I wouldn't be here without the women in my life. Here's a wonderful, beautiful photograph of my grandma, my late grandma Frida, who was a nurse. And nursing is something that happened as a trend. It's a theme. Let's talk research in our family. My mother in the centre there, also a nurse, retired nurse, a sister in recovery. And my sister, who unfortunately can't be here today, hello my sister, Ruth, who is the lead for critical care rehabilitation at our local trust. I'm going to go back to my mother. My mother is also my best friend. I speak to my mum on a daily basis. Not even once. I think sometimes we can talk maybe 4 or 5 times. And in simulation, you have something called a debrief. And I'll come on to that later. But that's where all your learning takes place. And I've learned so much and had so much guidance from my mother throughout my life. And that's definitely contributed. Between her and my father is where I am today. And Nina. So what do I do when I'm not doing this? I've committed some of years to hobbies in the past. I've spent 8 years or more being a ballroom dancer. I spent probably a similar length of time underwater. I try certain things, maybe not successfully landing the snowboard jump, I will say. But it looks good on that photo, does it not? I've telemark skied across the Arctic, and I've taken down a few feathery friends, I'm afraid to say, people. Stuart's in the room, and I was very fortunate to meet Stuart, my boyfriend, fiance. I think our first date was spent in a duo kayak on a place called the Bitches. And his safety briefing was, if we fall in, girlfriend, don't drop your paddle. So I was like, oh, okay. But we've spent many hours touring around the UK coastline, and now we tour slightly calmer waters with my daughter Nina in our open boat. So, with the help of the 8th member of our team, we have a slightly upscaled picture of myself. I've had my teeth done in this image. Early years as a student. Well, apparently I was a radiographer in the making and I didn't know it. So thank goodness your parents hold on to all of those notebooks from when you were a student in senior school. I had a flick through and I was quite surprised at how much radiography content was within my senior school notebooks. So who knew I was there? I've got a little bit to do with my drawing technique, but I'd say that they're actually relatively accurate, so I'm quite pleased with that. Moving on to my decision to become a radiographer. So it's no surprise that having family within healthcare, all those family conversations around the dinner table, my dad did try to put his 10 pence in and we used to shout technical at him. But little did he know that technical was something that radiography does quite a bit of. So I remember my mum said, well, why don't you go and try something? Go to a local hospital and try, see what they do, for a bit of work experience for the day. The first diagnostic test was something called a dacrocystogram, which I think is quite apt because that's looking at your tear ducts. And that's something that helps us show our emotions. And it really interested me of how much radiographers got involved with the tiniest little things in our body, as well as the other areas. But it was the patient interaction. I thought, wrongly, that nursing wasn't right for me because nurses spend maybe a lot longer with their patients and become even more emotionally attached. And I didn't want to become emotionally attached to my patients, so I thought, wrongly, that radiographers wouldn't be that, it would be the right career for me, because it was sort of fleeting moments. But oh my gosh, in those fleeting moments, do radiographers have an impact? And those patients stick with you. So radiography uses so many different modalities. We can use X-rays, computer tomography, magnetic resonance imaging, mammography, angiography. It goes on and on and on. And near enough, I'm not every patient, but if you go into hospital, you can pretty much come and visit a radiographer. And anyway, it was those sort of patient interactions, seeing somebody that was maybe young one minute and geriatric the next, or having some trauma-related incident, to just, coming to the hospital to have some investigations because of a long-term condition. It was so varied, and also the career progression that came with it, the opportunities were so vast that I thought this is something that I could look at. It's that radiography has like a front and back house. And you learning to be a professional when you're facing your patient. And it offers a little bit of downtime and an opportunity when you're, say, working behind the scenes to make sense of what you've just dealt with. And I think that really worked well for me to sort of manage my emotions. So I went to what was University of Central England. It's now Birmingham University. The image on the far left is a really strong thing, a strong memory of being at this university, and it's paternoster lifts. So my dad's laughing because if you've never been on a paternoster lift, they are hilarious. They don't stop moving. There's no doors. You jump in, you jump out. As a student, you think that they turn around at the top and you're there thinking, am I going to go back upside down? It was a real thing of, I'm going to go round and see what happens. And they were really efficient things. I mean, gosh knows why they're not in every building, because they can move a mass body of people. But it's a really strong memory of my student years. We had a great cohort. Some of my friends couldn't quite make it today, Adam, Sally and Helen, but we're still in contact. And I'm also still in contact with Dr. Denise Baker, who was my personal tutor when I was a student radiographer, and she was very good at listening to my woes, listening to when I didn't quite agree with the feedback that I was getting. One of those feedbacks still drilled into me today. I got dragged into the superintendent's office as a student, and they said, Naomi, your personality is great with the patients, you just need to pull it back a bit with the staff. How's that going to happen? It's not going to change. So anyway, I qualified. But with Denise, I've actually then worked with Denise at University of Derby. She then became my big boss because she's the Dean of Faculty. And then we became peer-to-peer when we did our doctorates together as well. So radiography is a small profession, and we are very close-knit and very supportive of each other. But we've got a good voice when we work together as well. So I did qualify. I became the professional, or at least I thought I was, working my way into that role, certainly. My clinical career, I qualified in 2000. I very quickly enjoyed training people and took up opportunities to train people. And I think that was where I found a niche for education. And it had to be something practical as well, so mandatory training. I was that person that kept telling you to use the slide sheet with the PAT slide. There we are. Through my senior radiography, I then went on to train at Bradford University as a reporting radiographer. And a reporting radiographer takes on the role to provide that legal report for radiographic images and other areas that you can extend your scope of practice into. It's not an easy exam, I can tell you. I spent 6 hours looking at images, and you had to have 95% accuracy rate to be able to pass. I didn't quite make it on round one, I can tell you. 93% hurts. But I got there on round two with a 97, so I made up for that. I continued to do reporting radiography right through into beyond my academic career as well. And I focused my time as well in computer tomography and magnetic resonance imaging before going into line management. Areas that I absolutely love are trauma and theatre. And there's that obligatory photo of me in my fresh uniform when I qualified. So I picked Queen's Medical Centre in Nottingham as my first hospital that I wanted to stay at. And it had a reputation at that time for being, you go there for 2 years, you get your experience and you move on. I was there for 8 years. I absolutely loved trauma. And the reason for it was because it's played to my strengths. I very much like being adaptable, problem solving. I love working interprofessionally. And also that impact of working with a patient. It's really a skill when somebody's in pain and somebody's vulnerable to be able to support them to move into positions that are not comfortable and to get the best diagnostic images from them. This image, it tours with me when I'm teaching. It is of a lady that took a shortcut in her life. She jumped over a fence that had a fleur-de-lis design on the top of it. She got her ring caught and it ripped off her finger when she fell off the other side. Don't take shortcuts in life. So when I moved up to the Highlands, it was a big move, actually. I'd never actually been to Scotland before moving up to Scotland. But it was a commitment I made, and I was very grateful of it. I love Scotland. I worked at Raigmore Hospital, and I managed the conventional imaging department at Raigmore Hospital and its satellite areas that are on the screen. Some of the key things that I learned when I was up there was how to provide services to vast geographical areas, and trying to align our ionising radiation medical education, it's gone from my brain, IRMA, oh dear, regulations, and aligning those across that vast area to make sure that everybody was doing something best. And also, I was the first reporting radiographer up in the Highland. And that was not easy. There was a lot of pushback when I first went up there. Why would a radiographer be a report? Like, why should we let you do our role? But with a lot of, I've already done it for 5 years at this point, and a lot of time auditing and showing that I was still able to do it, and I managed to push through those barriers. So I was very proud of that. And I also managed to set up and support other radiographers to do reporting. And that branched out into supporting the medicine students and supporting them to actually come through, which was an area where I really thought, okay, I like teaching. So, as my biography said, I've worked at 3 universities, and across those universities I've undertaken several roles. I've been personal tutor, which I absolutely loved, module leader. I've managed the MSc pre-reg programme and the BSc programme. I've supported college at University of Derby to look at their simulation and support simulation to take place. And now at Keele, working again interprofessionally, which I love. Whilst I was at Robert Gordon University, there's a thing, I'm sure, that when you start a new role, people hand over that chalice that is physics. I'm looking for Matt in the room. There he is. I shan't call it the poison chalice, but it is, you're going to teach the physics. So I took it on board. I actually enjoyed teaching it, but I tried to teach it in a very practical way. I used finger painting, and I had kidney beans and chickpeas and all manners of different beans to represent electrons and atoms, and we went back very primary school level, but actually it sank into people's heads. And the group of people here were my students, my first personal tutees, and within that university you stayed with them. You got to know these students, and I was with that group for 3 years, and I can tell you I'm still in contact with some of them now, and they really had an impact on me. And I also undertook my higher education in teaching qualification whilst I was up there. But it was actually learning and teaching physics in a practical way that gave me that thought of, well, what else can I teach here in a more practical manner? And that started me into looking at simulation. So I'm sure, looking around the room, many of you are very comfortable with simulation, but I'll go through it as a revision tool. So if we do it well, people, we do it with great planning and thinking about really what we want to learn from it. We then set our students up with a good briefing. What we don't want to do is plan a scenario or the activity that is trickery and trying to catch students out. It's very much about giving them that safe space to learn and test themselves and challenge themselves. Then, of course, there's the debrief. We refer to Mummy Shiner. This is a space where you ask students to kind of come on the same page, get them talking. What did they understand of that situation? What emotions did they feel in that situation? Why did they act in a certain way? If they were standing back or disengaged, why was that? What can they make about their learning points moving forward? That's where the learning takes place, okay? And then there's reflection, both for those involved and for faculty members that are delivering it, and of course evaluation. We constantly want this cycle to take place to make sure things are happening. Now, as an academic, I'm throwing in the theory. So the simulation is underpinned by different theoretical models. I've picked out two, just as examples to think about when we move forward in my presentation. So if I say that this dot is a finite amount of working memory, and that's what you need, and that's all you have, to make sense of doing a task. Now within that working memory, it's broken up into three areas. We have our intrinsic load, and that's how complex the task is, and that should be managed. That's how much information we give people and in order to process it. Then we have our germane load, and that's very much about taking new information and integrating it into what you already know and how you actually commit that to memory. And then we have the tricky little number called the extrinsic load, and we really want to minimise that. That's things that maybe aren't quite right in your scenario, or the information isn't quite there, or something's distracting you. Thankfully, it's not Nina right now. And we want to minimise that because it plays against us. The other theory is adult learning theory. And really, adults work at their best when you're practicing something that aligns to reality. So you want all of those tick boxes that we've got here, and one key one is emotion. You want to try and promote some sort of emotional connection within your simulation. And if you think about media, a lot of that is present when you're watching a movie. And actually that's what we try and work in as well. Take on board students' prior experiences, take on board the knowledge that you've given them, and take on board your desired outcome, and then you've got a better space moving forward. Now, as an example of a skill that you might put within a scenario, a simulation, is undertaking resuscitation. And here we have the death mask, a girl with a mask. And this was a 16-year-old girl that didn't quite make it through life. She was found drowned in the River Seine. But her face became very popular, this death mask, in the arts around 1900s. And then when Safran Lardell created the resuscitation mannequin, they used that face to place on the CPR mannequin. And that mannequin's now known as the most kissed face in the world, which I think is lovely. But her take-home, and I think her lasting legacy is one of great magnitude, that even though that she lost her life, she has actually saved thousands more. Now, in terms of mannequins, we've seen a lot more diversity, and that's important because students need to have connection within the scenario as well. And I'm more than happy to show that we've got our Gwen, a young lady, 8-year-old, that has committed to sharing her body, literally, for education, and we now have Gwen the mannequin, who depicts somebody with Down syndrome. There are many different simulation modalities that we might use to teach students. Some are part task trainers, such as that mannequin, so long as it's integrated within a scenario. We don't want just to say it's simulation when we're just delivering a skill. Mannequins that allow a lot more interactivity, so we might do some venipuncture, we might check their statistics, OBS, etc. We might use simulated participants that are actors that come in and play a role, and that's really great for communication. We might use gamification. I know that we've had some great success in our space here at Keele with gamification. And that's really good for engaging students early on in their sort of teetering into simulation, is to kind of get them going within it. Visually enhanced mental simulation. So this, a good example of that would be possibly like a major incident where you're giving information in and students are sat around a table and working things out. And then with the new digital age, we have extended reality, and that really opens up our opportunities, because if we don't have the resources, we can put students within those immersive spaces, those virtual reality headsets. We can put patients in our room with us using our digital devices. So there's lots and lots of different opportunities, much like radiography, many different modalities that we need to learn. So my foray into simulation, my sort of almost striking moment in my career probably, was for me to play the patient. And in order to do that, I used moulage. So moulage is, you'll see here a number of masks on the screen. This is an image from Moulage Museum in Zurich. And moulage is basically a skill in order to sort of allow you to depict a disease, a pathology on the body somewhere. It's useful because if you imagine asking a nurse, radiographer, occupational therapist to look at a patient's ulcer or look at a patient's laceration, but you don't give them that to look at and you're just asking them to imagine it, then you're adding to that cognitive load. You're using up that working memory unnecessarily. So you can give them that tool. It brings them all onto the same page. They might make informed choices that they didn't think they would have thought when they're having to imagine it. I was going to stand here and moulage myself up, but at that point I wasn't quite sure what the setup was going to be. So this is something you can take away at home. Get some lipstick, some blusher from your other half, dab some Vaseline on, peel apart some loo roll so it's a single ply, dab it on, spray it liberally with water, and then just pull away at those edges so that you've got a ragged edge. Now that one edge does annoy me because it's a bit straight, so just bear with me on that. And then you kind of pull away some of that, and it eventually gives you that view of a blistered skin, a scald or something like that. So it's quite a nice one to take away for Halloween if you go to town on it. And it doesn't cost you much to do either. Here are some others that use different techniques. So there's an image there of my thigh with a nice laceration using silicone mould. And then we've got some context added to it, a leg, a moulage with a person in a theatre setting. And if you look beyond the moulage, you'll see one of those immersive spaces where we've been able to put a student into a theatre setting. And it is dynamic as well. You can move with these silicone aspects, and patients can be within the simulation and you can treat them. So I'm going to go on to when I was the patient. And what I want you to do is just have a look at what's taking place on the video, because it'll start straight away. So there's me wearing some moulage on my face. I've got different degree burns over my body, and I've brought students in. There's about 13 wrapped around my bedside, and their challenge is to look after a patient with complex care needs. This part of the video was taken towards the debrief stage, and so they're talking through what they'd seen and what they made of the situation. Now you'll see I come alive and take off my oxygen mask. If you look at the student's face, chin dropped, wide-eyed, shocked as anything. Now, we're all having a laugh at this point, but I can tell you I had a GoPro on my chest. And being that patient and being able to see, whilst I was being in the room with the students, they were very much closed body language, awkward faces, the interaction, the communication wasn't there, they were uncomfortable. The poignant point here is that I was their personal tutor for 3 years, remember? So these students didn't recognise me, and that's why they're shocked. That's why they're laughing, because they didn't realise it was me. They'd looked purely at the burns on my face. They hadn't seen the person behind the mask. That had one of the really good assessment outcomes for that particular module off the back of that simulation. And off the back of it for me, after presenting it at what was UKRC at that point, was that I was very kindly awarded the Alan Nichols Memorial Award for the work. And you can see I'm very cheesily greening at that photo. But that was the beginning of what became the doctorate journey. So I was invited to a writing retreat, and within 5 minutes of walking into this retreat, I was introduced to a very wonderful lady called Professor Dawn Foreman. And within 5 minutes, that lady said, right, you're doing your doctorate. I'm not lying, I'm not exaggerating. And I was like, oh. And actually, she made me feel very empowered at that point and very able. And with her support, I spent many years working towards my doctorate journey. It isn't something that I would say if anyone in the room is considering it and saying it's not quite right time for me, just looking at my team. If anyone wants to do a doctorate, go ahead and do it. Life continues. In a space of 6 years, a lot happens. So as we heard, the title of my doctorate is quite long-winded, so we'll move forward. But there was a focus on emotional labour and emotional preparedness when seeing open wounds. Now, when you're looking at doing a doctorate, you're building on existing evidence base, and I'm delighted to see Dr. Emma Hyde, Professor Ruth Strudwick, Sarah Jane Kesserer, and Dr. Amy Hancock in the room, because a lot of their work underpinned why I was going to bring this all together. Students were struggling with transitioning into clinical practice for one reason or another: pain, patients with complex needs. Students were using emotional labour. We want students to feel like they can have an impact with our patients and be compassionate. I also needed to make sure that nobody had done it before. So there was the mandatory literature review. And I was pleased to see that although there were themes in interprofessional education, use of computer software, which was no surprise in radiography, and patient interaction, nobody had really brought in simulation and moulage, which then became the focus. Now, I've broken this diagram up just to take you through it a bit slower. Just as a reminder, we've got our cognitive load up in the top, and then we've got emotion at the bottom. And what you have to remember is that emotion really plays a role in either impairing or improving our ability, that working memory, to kind of work through a situation. If we work well with emotion, it can improve that memory of an event. If we're using emotional labour, there's a lot on the diagram, work towards the red, then what we might find and what we see in clinical practice is that radiographers will use emotional labour, and it will basically move towards burnout. What emotional labour is basically hiding your emotion or portraying a professional self that is better for the patient or is better for the organisation. So you're suppressing your own emotions. So if you actively continually do that and don't find an outlet, you are at risk of burnout. If, however, we work with our experiences, whether they are simulated or whether they are real life, and begin to understand things like ourselves in terms of emotional intelligence, how we manage our emotions, and how we support our emotions with others, that has an important role reducing burnout and emotional labour. So, more complexity diagrams. I went ahead and created my doctorate methodology. In short, I had a control group of students that went straight out onto clinical practice without any intervention whatsoever. I had a simulation group that undertook a simulation, which I'll describe in a second, and then they went out in clinical practice. Along that journey, I asked both groups to tell me how they were feeling. And then I brought them back in for an interview at the end. I did capture lots of data. So I captured quantitative data through the questionnaires. I captured qualitative data at the point of thematically analysing the debriefs, and later on I used interpretive phenomenological analysis, which is really good for understanding people's lived experiences and their emotions. So I pulled it all together at the end to come out with some more information, which I'll come to in a bit. But this is the interesting bit. This is the simulation, and you can see that I used an actress. She had some moulage on her ankle that was depicting a lateral malleoli fracture of her ankle. I also had a laceration to her knee and some bruising. Her backstory was she fell out of the loft looking for some Christmas decorations along that thread. And it was important, for students to realise that their role at this point was purely to support the radiographer, because these were first-year students, so I had to make sure that the scenario wasn't something that in clinical practice, they wouldn't be left alone with this patient, they'd just have a supportive role. But we also wanted to know what sort of experiences students were having, no yawning in the gallery please, what students were experiencing in clinical practice. And they were seeing open wounds. They were seeing them in theatre, they were seeing them uncovered, and they were actively bleeding. And their experiences were of, in terms of the short quotes to the left, were that they felt that the simulation was real enough, that it had that sort of physiological changes. They felt that they were running flustered. They didn't feel when they're in clinical practice that certain cuts and bones didn't bother them anymore because of the simulation, and that the simulation and the blood helped them. The big quote is of a student that did go through the simulation. I think this draws back on when I talk about the experiences that people have. That lady went into a theatre without any prep, any briefing, and they were told that what she found was a young child having spinal surgery for cancer. She had no debriefing afterwards either, and what she connected with was her child of the same age at home. And the impact of that was that she basically struggled to have any involvement with paediatrics for several weeks, and she really struggled on clinical placement. So despite a simulation, if we've got no support in clinical practice coming from our supervisors, it really does leave them floundering. Do not attempt to read the tiny writing. In short, those graphs tell me that the control group were left kind of flagging behind the simulation group. The simulation group had statistically significant reduction in their negative emotions, so fear, being scared, being distracted. All of those were reduced because of the simulation. When they went out on clinical placement, they kind of come aligned. You almost see the same on the bottom graph, the same trend. But what it was saying is actually the students in the simulation had already reached that point, whereas the students that hadn't had the simulation had to experience something with a real patient, and that real patient might have been impacted by that student reaction. Students found the simulation real, the meta-inferences at the end, bringing all of that information together. They found that they were able to transfer their learning into clinical practice. They found that knowledge was power. If they weren't prepared for the situation, then they hanged on to that situation for a lot longer. Lack of information meant there was lack of closure. Emotional support. Those that went through the simulation learned an element of debriefing with each other, learned who to go to. Those that didn't were left almost looking for answers, and they were looking in the wrong places. They didn't feel able to go to their supervising radiographers. They went to people that maybe didn't have the answers but did have the sort of emotional support, like friends and family. I continued to work whilst I was on my doctorate and publish along the way with a chapter in a radiography book, as well as the findings. I also became a mother whilst I was still doing my doctorate journey. That wasn't an easy journey either. It took several rounds of IVF to get Nina. She's exceptionally precious to myself and Stuart. But with the support of colleagues, I continued to actually capture data collection and work through my maternity leave on my doctorate as well. And actually the image on the far right is of Kiel, when Advanced HE Net, my first footsteps into Kiel campus, and I brought Nina with me. Other challenges presented whilst I was doing my doctorate, that was COVID. So somewhere where actually we lost a lot of human connection, and we were very much just seeing our friends' family at the end of a driveway or through a screen. Teaching with a child at home during COVID and also trying to keep students engaged was also sometimes challenging, even with my personality. I had to add some feathers and some music, and I'm not singing. But this was quite literally what I did every now and then to keep my students on ball and keep them engaged, was just crop up with something different to wear. It also presented opportunities to look at how simulation was being used across a global platform. And there was a sort of pre and post review of simulation use here. There was a lot of money. I mean, basically, it was a catalyst for use of simulation. It was already being used before, but everybody needed to jump on board at this point, and there was money to support it. What we saw after was actually about 50% of people continued to grow simulation, about 30% held where they were, and some people declined away from it. There was, at the time of COVID, a big reliance on computer technology, less reliance on simulated participants because actually we couldn't have the face-to-face. But it supported us to get our students through. What I did notice was actually everybody was quite reactional. We had to do it very quickly. So that's where I looked at publishing, is there time for a simulation strategy to make sure that people considered it going forward. Now, radiography is a profession, like many others in the NHS, that is running with a national shortage for a period of time. And simulation as an adjunct to clinical practice offers us an opportunity to expand our cohorts and get more people out in clinical practice. What we do have to remember, though, is that out in clinical practice at the minute, the pressures are high, burnout is big. Patients necessarily aren't that happy with what they're receiving, and actually we might have patient complaints that come through. And myself and Alexandra, partner in the room, worked on a wonderful simulation that was around patient complaints. And that really was a bit of a curveball for our students who was expecting to undertake an X-ray, and before they knew it, they were confronted with an unhappy person. But there we go. So I made it, very pleased to say, with the support of my family, Professor Dawn Foreman and Professor Stevens Wordsworth, and my peers, Denise Baker and Melanie, who is going strong, and she will qualify very soon. If the BDI people amongst you notice I've got two different outfits on the photo on the left and the photo on the right. Only I could qualify or graduate in the wrong outfit. It was not my fault, I will add. Anyway, so we have updated photographs. For those that are thinking about doing a doctorate, you learn a lot about yourself. You grow immensely. You know what underpins you as your family and your friends. You overcome so many challenges. I think the mantra that came from Stuart along the way was, just get it done, girlfriend. I was like, okay, keep going. You learn not only where your beliefs are, but also who knew I had beliefs in certain levels of research? And, I'm very much a pragmatist. I learned a lot. But I think as well it's the ability to stand up and fight for what you think is right, and certainly advocacy is one of the things that I've used. So that quote from Marie Curie, I was taught that the way of progress was neither swift nor easy, it resonates very clearly with me. So within education, we do call upon people to be vulnerable. We ask patients to come and share their stories. We call them experts by experience or patients as educators, but at the end of the day, they are a patient. It might be a carer that comes along and shares how the situation is. What I would say to you is Who do you see when you see my daughter? What do you see very quickly when you see my daughter? Because I can tell you when I go out and about, people see Down syndrome before they see and know my daughter. They make assumptions, they link stereotypes with her. When we go into NHS, there's a definite situation there when people will just see a diagnosis. And we've got some shocking statistics coming through at the present time from the Royal College of Nurses that say 42% of people with a learning disability that died in 2022, those deaths could have been avoidable. I am more than my diagnosis. My daughter loves music, she loves dancing, she has friends. She goes to school, mainstream school. Everybody wants to know that question, so I thought I'd throw it out there. She loves pizza. She has the best and the biggest amount of fight in her that I have seen in any other person. We have not had a smooth journey. We have experienced safeguarding procedures through no fault of our own. Nina has had heart surgery. We've experienced award-winning care from dietitians. We've experienced care that I have complained and made myself known, very much so. But that's something that I've got the position I can do that. Many, many parents can't. Now, along the way, I've had somebody behind me, and you can hear the wobble, so I'm going to pause. I'm fading it so I don't go karaoke. My sister Ruth could not quite make it here today, but my gosh, does that girl have my back. We are known as the Shiner sisters. We are a force to be reckoned with. She knows exactly when I need to be told what for and when she needs to sit back and listen to me. This lady has seen me through some exceptionally challenging times, and we continue to support each other. So Ruth, if you're listening at home, thank you so much. I love you loads. And I'm going to move on. But what I have done with our experiences is start to try and teach other people about Down syndrome. And I've had the privilege to use my position to access students, access qualified radiographers, and talk through our situations. I've been invited to write about it, and my gosh, was I thankful for that opportunity. It was a big decision whether or not to put our lives out on paper, because when it's out there, it's out there. But this paper, when we look at impact, sometimes with research, they count it in numbers, metrics. I can tell you this paper's got 5 citations, so please up it. If you're going to go and do some work, I'd like some more citations. But it's only got 5. But along the way, it's had probably the biggest impact of where I wanted it to have, which is on the ground with our patients. I've had people contact me that have said, can we please feature your article? I've had numerous NHS hospitals that have contacted me saying, do you mind if we send this article round our staff? Not at all, crack on, it's where it needs to be seen, not buried in a database somewhere. Me sharing my story with Nina has allowed other people to feel empowered to share theirs, and they've come back and thanked me for that. And I've chosen this, this made me laugh, because this is a little bit like a top trumps card. And who knew I had a super skill in radiology simulation? But there we go. Somebody created that for me for Radiopedia conference, which has 10,000 delegates each year. And I've been asked to present the same work again this year. But where do we struggle sometimes to see the real impact, and does it impact on our patients? And I was very fortunate that actually our Down syndrome community is very tight, and this information came back to me. And this was a mother who was in hospital with her daughter. They were distressed. They were there for several days. And it just so happened that before this student went on clinical placement, they'd had the joy of listening to me talk about Nina and myself, and saw an opportunity to go and make a difference. Now, what I haven't left in here is that this individual, this mother, had said that the qualified staff were all seen behind a nurse's station doing not a lot. I mean, we don't know whether they could be doing a lot, but that's what she saw as the patient's mother. And it was the student nurse that came to make the difference. So I'm more than happy that we've been able to have an impact. Stay with it, Nina. We're almost at the end, not quite yet. So I think imposter syndrome's big, isn't it? But actually, I have to be brave. I have to put my big girl pants on. I have to shout about it, because otherwise Janice St. John Matthews will have words with me afterwards. So yay to me. I was very kindly awarded the Outstanding Lecturer of the Year award at Derby University. You can see I'm very chuffed to have that National Teaching Fellowship, and I had my Senior Fellowship at the same time. The National Teaching Fellowship actually was, for those that don't know, you can only put forward so many people from your university, and it's a real process of peer review to be able to get it. So I was awarded it for having a sphere of influence extending locally, nationally and internationally, and mentoring others, and working as an outstanding educator in the field of simulation. Even things like giving people access. I think that's one of my strengths, is the networking side, and giving people that access to have a voice and share opportunities. So even with our specialist interest group, we had people from Canada, New Zealand, South Africa, Nigeria, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, America, and it's bringing those people together so that we can learn together. In terms of my national and international influence, external examining, that's something that is an option for many people, and actually you learn a lot from others within your own country. But I've worked with, had opportunities to develop e-learning for health materials, been on steering group panels. A more recent group community of practice is with trying to build up our knowledge of moulage and trying to bring together safety checklists. I'm working really hard with Sarah Jane in the room on our European Radiological Federation for Radiological Sciences, more water needed. And in terms of providing them with that forum, their guidance and simulation for the European societies. And also having a foot in providing strategy that's going forward. I love going to places and sharing what I can. Two places that are very close to me, because I've made many friendships along the way, are going to Vienna, European Congress in Radiology, and we're going to RSNA, where I've made exceptional friendships with Amy and Janice in the room. Other external roles include working for ASPI, as I say, and again, between ASPI and UKIO, there's some alliance there with not alliance, it's coming together of providing people with the opportunity to have that patient voice come forward. Advisor for industry, peer reviewing people in terms of articles, and also supervising other PhD work. And I land here in Kiel, and wow, what an opportunity to make a difference. I was not anticipating landing and starting a job and changing our wonderful Darwin building into our healthcare simulation suite. But we have managed it along the way. I've been working with our colleagues all across the whole faculty to try and get a resource that supports us all. I will say, Trevor, I think Shiner's Simulation Centre had a ring to it. And I have written that. I've claimed the building. It's hidden behind panelling, so you won't see it, but I've got my name on it, literally. But what I will say and take an opportunity is what a team do I work with? Just give yourselves a little wave, team, so that people can see you. A little bigger wave. I work with a group of people that are nurses, midwives, children nurses, critical care nurses. They have supported, I've learned loads from them, but they have supported this whole faculty and beyond, faculty of veterinary practice as well, to pull together some outstanding simulations, and some of those have been award-winning as well at this point. We are seeing some fantastic work out of that building. If anyone's floating around tomorrow and hasn't seen it, I'll still give you a tour. So what's coming next? For me, I would love to, and I will be, making kill simulation a national, international opportunity for training. And I really want to focus on neurodiversity and learning disability in simulation. I think it can be a bit of a tricky area in terms of working with those patient groups and simulating that in a meaningful way. ASPE accreditation, let's make sure we get our quality stamp for the quality work that we do. And of course, I'm not one for badges, but there is the Principal Fellowship of HEA that's outstanding, so why not? Just to bring me to a close, because I'm probably well over, I want to just give a shout out to the great women of science. Sorry, chaps, but this is a women's moment. This is a bag that I bought in RSNA along with my friends, and just tucked away in the corner there is Marie Curie. So this is a big thank you and recognition of lots of women that have had an impact. I'm not that PowerPoint savvy, so just take it on the chin that you've had an impact on me at some point if your face doesn't appear. And of course, for those that came before us as well. And one for Deborah will know how much meaning our little furry friends bring to us. I'm dedicating it to my Harris and my Monty, and another little wobble, but they've walked with me in a lot of challenges as well. And that's me, so thank you very much.